What do you do when the life you built, everything you thought you wanted, crumbles into dust? For Sarah Walters, the answer wasn't simple. Divorce wasn't just a word to her. It was a rupture, a wound that never seemed to heal. Sitting on the edge of a lumpy couch in her friend Jessica's cramped apartment, Sarah ran her fingers over the edge of a chipped chocolate table, her mind a jumble of what-ifs. What if she hadn't walked away from Gavin, the steady man she once called her husband? What if she had saved instead of spending, like she was trying to drown her heartbreak in designer bags and champagne? The reality of her situation weighed heavily. 3 years ago, she had been handed a fortune from her late aunt, an unexpected windfall that should have changed her life for the better. Instead, it had become her downfall. A whirlwind of indulgence followed. First, class flights to tropical getaways, glittering parties where everyone knew her name, and a wardrobe filled with clothes she wore only once. At the time, it felt like freedom. She was no longer Gavin's wife. She was Sarah, the woman who could have it all. But having it all didn't last. Sarah glanced around Jessica's apartment. The space was small and cluttered but warm. Family photos lined the walls, and the smell of freshly brewed chocolate lingered in the air. This wasn't her world, yet here she was, dependent on her friend's generosity. Jessica had offered her a place to stay after Sarah's eviction, an act of kindness Sarah hadn't fully appreciated yet. "I still can't believe it," Sarah muttered, breaking the silence. Jessica, seated at the kitchen table with her laptop, glanced up. "Can't believe what?" "That it's all gone. The money, the lifestyle." Sarah trailed off, her voice laced with bitterness. "I worked so hard to forget everything after the divorce, and now I'm just here." Jessica set her laptop aside and leaned forward. "And where did forgetting everything get you? You've got to stop running, Sarah. Maybe it's time you face what's really going on." Sarah looked away, her chest tightening. Facing it meant acknowledging that her lavish spending had been a desperate attempt to fill the void left by her divorce. And she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Adjusting to life in Jessica's apartment wasn't just hard, it was humiliating. Sarah had spent years surrounded by the finest things money could buy, and now she was sharing a bathroom with Jessica's 6-year-old son Nathan, who never seemed to stop talking. The tiny apartment always felt too loud, too small, and too chaotic. "Mommy, where's my backpack?" Nathan's voice pierced through the walls one morning. "It's by the door, sweetheart," Jessica called back, stirring a pot of oatmeal on the stove. She glanced at Sarah, who was nursing a cup of chocolate at the table, still in her pajamas. "You okay?" "Fine," Sarah lied, staring into her mug. She wasn't fine. The rejection emails from job applications were piling up. Apparently, spending inherited money like it's going out of style wasn't a marketable skill. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling more useless by the day. Jessica sat across from her, a mixture of patience and frustration etched on her face. "Look, I know this is hard for you, but you've got to do something. Anything. Sitting here all day isn't going to fix things." "What do you want me to do, Jessica?" Sarah snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. "I've tried. I'm trying." Jessica didn't flinch. "Then try harder. You can't keep waiting for something to fall into your lap. Life doesn't work like that." The words stung, but Sarah knew Jessica was right. Still, the idea of stepping out into the world felt overwhelming. Every time she thought about finding work or facing the people she used to call her friends, shame wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Later that afternoon, Jessica handed her a flyer for a local community center. "They're always looking for volunteers. It's not glamorous, but it's a start." "A volunteer?" Sarah frowned. "Yes, a volunteer," Jessica said firmly. "You need structure, and you need to feel useful again. Just think about it." Sarah didn't answer. She stared at the flyer for a long time after Jessica walked away, her mind swirling with doubts. What would people think if they saw her there, handing out food or cleaning up after strangers? But as the evening crept in and the city lights flickered through the window, Sarah found herself wondering, what if Jessica was right? What if this was the only way to stop running from the past? And just like that, the first cracks in her defenses began to show. The community center smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, a mix Sarah hadn't encountered in years. She stood awkwardly by the front desk, clutching the flyer Jessica had given her. A friendly but tired-looking woman with graying hair smiled at her. "You must be Sarah. Welcome." "I'm Linda," the woman said, her voice warm. Sarah nodded, feeling out of place in her neatly pressed blouse and designer shoes, remnants of a life she no longer lived. "I wanted to see how I could help." Linda handed her a clipboard. "You can start by signing in, then we'll get you to work." Sarah spent the first few hours organizing donated clothes, sorting through boxes of gently used items. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, tangible work. For the first time in months, she felt useful. She listened to the chatter of other volunteers, most of whom spoke about their struggles openly. Divorce, layoffs, illness. It seemed everyone here was carrying something heavy. That's when she met Irene, an elderly woman with sparkling eyes and a quick wit. Irene had been volunteering at the center for over a decade. "Keeps me young," she joked, handing Sarah a stack of winter coats to sort. "What brought you here?" Irene asked. Sarah hesitated. "I guess life happened. I needed something to do." Irene chuckled. "Life happens to all of us, dear. The question is, what do we do about it?" The words stayed with Sarah long after she left the center that day. As she walked back to Jessica's apartment, her thoughts drifted to Gavin. She hadn't seen or spoken to him in over a year, but the memories lingered. The arguments, the loneliness, and the undeniable truth that her spending spree had begun shortly after the divorce. A sudden wave of guilt hit her. Maybe she hadn't just been trying to forget Gavin. Maybe she'd been trying to erase the version of herself she didn't want to face. By the third week at the community center, Sarah had begun to settle into a rhythm. She found herself looking forward to her shifts, especially her chats with Irene. But one afternoon, as she was helping serve meals, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Sarah?" She turned and saw Gavin standing near the door. He looked older, though not in a bad way, just more grounded. "Gavin?" she breathed, her pulse quickening. "I thought that was you," he said, stepping closer. "What are you doing here?" "I volunteer," she replied, feeling oddly self-conscious. "And you?" Gavin held up a folder. "I'm helping with some funding initiatives through my firm." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Gavin said, "It's good to see you, Sarah." "You too," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Later that evening, Sarah couldn't shake the encounter. Gavin had seemed different, calmer, happier even. Seeing him reminded her of everything she had lost, not just the marriage, but the stability, the partnership. Jessica noticed her quiet mood that night. "What's going on with you?" "I saw Gavin today," Sarah admitted. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "And how did that feel?" "Awful," Sarah confessed. "But also, like maybe I needed to see him. Like I've been hiding from everything him. The divorce. My own mistakes." Jessica nodded. "Maybe it's time you stop hiding then." The words echoed in Sarah's mind as she lay awake that night. She'd been running for so long, spending money she didn't have, chasing a life that wasn't hers. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. But where did she even begin? The days at the community center became the anchor Sarah didn't realize she needed. Sorting donations, serving meals, and occasionally chatting with the people who came through its doors gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Yet, a gnawing anxiety lingered beneath the surface. Seeing Gavin had stirred up emotions she wasn't ready to unpack. One chilly afternoon, as Sarah was folding winter coats, an old friend from her high society days walked in. Elise, with her perfectly coiffed hair and tailored coat, stood out against the humble surroundings like a diamond in a jewelry box. "Sarah Walters," Elise said with a smirk. "Of all places, I didn't expect to see you here." "Elise," Sarah replied, her smile tight. They exchanged pleasantries, and Elise quickly launched into stories about her latest investments, luxurious travels, and the kind of life Sarah had once lived. Then came the offer. "You know," Elise began, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "I'm opening a new boutique downtown. High-end, exclusive, very chic. I could use someone with your taste and connections to help me launch it." Sarah blinked. It was tempting, almost too tempting. The boutique was exactly the kind of thing she had once dreamed of being part of. But the strings were evident. Elise wasn't offering her a lifeline out of kindness. She wanted to use Sarah's name to attract the right clientele. "Thank you," Sarah said slowly. "But I'll need to think about it." Elise looked surprised. "Of course, just don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." The encounter left Sarah rattled. That night, as she recounted the conversation to Jessica, her friend's reaction was swift. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" Jessica asked, crossing her arms. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "It's a chance to start over." "No," Jessica said firmly. "It's a chance to fall back into the same trap. Elise doesn't care about you, Sarah. She cares about what you can do for her." Jessica's words stung, but they also struck a chord. Sarah lay awake that night, torn between the seductive pull of her old life and the quiet satisfaction she was beginning to find in her new one. The following week, Sarah found herself back at the community center, more distracted than usual. She avoided Irene's knowing gaze and busied herself with tasks, trying to push Elise's offer from her mind. But the decision couldn't be avoided forever. Elise called a few days later, her tone less friendly than before. "So, have you made up your mind?" "I appreciate the offer," Sarah began cautiously, "but I'm going to have to pass." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Elise let out a sharp laugh. "Well, that's disappointing. I hope you're happy sorting used clothes and serving soup." The words cut deep, but Sarah held her ground. "I am, actually. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Elise hung up without another word. The rejection stung, but it was also liberating. For the first time, Sarah had chosen to put her values over appearances. That same evening, she sat with Jessica at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "I said no to Elise," Sarah said quietly. Jessica smiled. "I'm proud of you. But now what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I still don't have a job. I still don't have a plan." Jessica reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "You're already doing the hard work, Sarah. The rest will come. You've just got to keep going." It wasn't the answer Sarah wanted, but it was the one she needed. And as she went to bed that night, she felt a flicker of hope, small but steady. Winter arrived in the city with a biting cold, and Sarah felt it in her bones as she walked the familiar path to the community center. She had come to appreciate the quiet predictability of her days there. But as much as the routine steadied her, it couldn't erase the weight of her reality. The encounter with Gavin had left her grappling with memories she had tried to bury. Their divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of the person she thought she was. She had loved him, but she hadn't known how to navigate the loneliness that crept into their relationship like a thief in the night. One afternoon, as she sorted through a box of old books, she found herself staring at a worn copy of a poetry collection. She opened it to find a handwritten inscription on the first page. "To love and lose is better than to never have loved at all." The words stabbed at her heart. That evening, she sat by the window in Jessica's apartment, watching the snow fall in soft, quiet drifts. The apartment was silent, Jessica and Nathan having gone to bed early. For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself to cry. It wasn't just about the divorce, though that was a part of it. It was everything: the money she had squandered, the life she had wasted chasing fleeting pleasures, the deep sense of loss that came with realizing she had no one to blame but herself. The community center gave her purpose, but it didn't fill the emptiness. Jessica's kindness provided shelter, but it couldn't erase the shame she felt for needing it. Gavin's brief presence had reminded her of what she had thrown away. She reached for her phone and, on impulse, dialed Gavin's number. To her surprise, he picked up. "Sarah? It's me," she said, her voice trembling. There was a long pause before he spoke. "Is everything okay?" "No," she admitted. I needed to hear your voice." "Sarah," he began, but she cut him off. "I'm sorry, Gavin, for everything. For the way things ended. For walking away without really trying to fix things. For all the ways I failed you." Gavin sighed. "We both made mistakes, Sarah. but we can't undo what's been done. I know, she whispered. I just needed to say it. They talked for a few minutes more, their conversation bittersweet. When she hung up, Sarah felt lighter, but also more alone. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah continued her work at the community center, but the spark of hope she had felt before began to fade. The weight of her regrets grew heavier, and her smiles became harder to muster. One evening she packed her things quietly, leaving a note for Jessica on the kitchen table. Thank you for everything. I've decided to leave and figure things out on my own. You've given me more than I could ever repay, and I'll never forget it. Sarah. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. As Sarah stepped out into the cold night, the snow falling softly around her, she realized that the void she had been trying to fill since the divorce wasn't just about losing Gavin or the money. It was about losing herself. And now, with nothing left but a suitcase and a handful of memories, she faced the hardest truth of all. Some wounds never heal, and some mistakes can't be undone. The snow swallowed her footsteps as she disappeared into the night, leaving behind the life she could no longer bear to face.